Today we'll be learning how to draw a straight line graph. Now before we get started, I'd just like to point out a way that I've noticed students that usually do general maths draw their graph, which isn't the wrong way, but it's usually more time consuming, which is the box method. So you pretty much draw your x and y axes on a table and you just substitute values. So let's do -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. So now what we usually do is we sub these x values into our equation. So for example, -2 would become y equals 3 -2 -6. So y would equal -12. So over here you just put -12 and so on and so forth. Now doing that method takes a bit of time, and I've noticed students make simple calculation mistakes when they sub it back into the formula. Now the step after that is usually you draw a little graph, you label your x and y, your little 0, and then what students do is they write -1, -2, -3, and then the same for the y-axis, -1, -2, -3, and the same for the positive values, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, so on and so forth. And then all you have to do is pretty much sub in your values. So if x at the top here equals -2, then you go to x equals -2, and then y value for -12, which would be about here somewhere, if I had to extend that, -12. And then all you'd have to do is plot your other points and then connect the dots together to have your straight line. Now this method is a bit more time consuming than the method I'm going to show you now, and there's less chances of students making mistakes when they sub it back into the original formula. During your HSC or your preliminary exams, all teachers really want to see is your graph and your points of intersection. They don't really need to see all these little points here, all these values. All they really want to see is where the graph intersects the y-axis and the x-axis. So now what we're going to do is learn a different method. I'll use a different colored pen. So this new method is pretty simple. All you have to do is always, step 1, let me write it here, step 1, you always write this down, so just write down let x equal 0. So now when I let x equal 0, I just sub it back into this formula right here. So that becomes y equals 3, 0, -6. So the answer to this becomes -6. So y equals -6. That's one value that I have. Step 2, will be let y equal 0. So now we've let x equal 0 already. Now we're going to let y equal 0. So now we're going to sub in y equals 0 into our formula over here. So 0 equals 3x -6. So now we want to get the x by itself. So I'm going to bring the 6 over to the other side. So +6 and +6, which becomes 6 equals 3x. And then to get rid of the 3, since it's 3 times x, the opposite of that is divide. So I'm going to divide it by 3. Same thing here, divided by 3. So 6 divided by 3 is 2. equals, and the 3 and 3 cancel each other out, x. So x equals 2. And that is my second value. So now I've got up here y equals -6 and x equals 2. So now all we need to do is sub these values into our table. So now if I had to draw the table, let me just do a different pen. Now let me just draw our little axes. So we got our y-axis and our x-axis, 0. So all teachers really want to see is, you know which axis is the y, which axis is the x, and your 0 point, where all the values are relative to. So if I just scroll up a little bit, now the first value is y equals -6 when x equals 0. So x equals 0 here, and y will be -6. So -6 is down here, so I'm just going to write -6. Now for the second one, let y equal 0, x will equal -2. 2. And 2 would be about here. Now these graphs that we are drawing, they're not 100% accurate, meaning these points right over here, the -2 and -1, they're not exactly, and -3, the same distance apart, which means there's no real point in writing -3, -2, -1, since it's not a 100% accurate graph, because, well, really we can't really draw them. So all teachers really want to see is, do you know where this line intersects the x and y axes, which we do. So x 2, and for the y axis it will be -6. So since we have our 2 points of intersection, all we have to do is just connect the 2 points up. So that becomes a straight line, and then all we have to do is label it. So y equals 3x minus 6. Just draw a little arrow. Y equals 3x minus 6. And that's all you have to do. Label your axes. Let me just grab a little highlighter kind of thing. Just label your axes, your 0 point, and most importantly, your point of intersection. As long as you label your point of intersection, you will always get the mark right for it. Or, sorry, you always get the mark for it. So, don't forget Now, if you use this method to draw a graph, you can quite literally draw any straight line graph you get, either in your preliminary HTC course or your HTC course itself. This method will always work. I'll just show you why it will always work. So, now let's just say I have a question, which is, let's just say y equals 3. And another question B saying x equals -2, for example. So if I had to draw these graphs, y equals 3 and x equals -2, I will just draw my x and y plane. So y, x, 0. Now this y equals 3, this is a straight line graph. So y is 3 over here, and if I had to draw this graph, it would just cut it right there. So it would just be a straight line, just like that. Now if I had to draw the x equals -2, the same thing applies. X, the -2 value would be right about there somewhere. So if I had to draw that graph, it would look just like that. Now, the reason this method works is, if we go up again to where we started, step 1, let x equals 0. If I let x equal 0, I'm going to draw that graph right now. Just label my y-axis, label my x-axis. So when x equals 0, my graph will be right over here. That is the graph x equals 0. So if I let x equal 0 and I sub it back into my formula, this line, this straight line we have, will intersect this line, being x equals 0. And if we sub it in, we will pretty much find out where this straight line right here intersects this graph. And that point is y equals minus 6. Right there. Now the same thing also applies for step 2. When we let y equal 0. So if I had to draw the graph y equals 0, let's draw my graph, y and x, 0. So if I had to draw my graph y equals 0, that would look like right there. Now the same thing also happens here. If I let y equal 0, our straight line, being this one right here, y equals 3x minus 6, will pass this line right here. And if I let it equal 0, y equals 0, I can find out where that point of intersection is, being x equals 2. So this line that we have, y equals 0, gets cut by this line in our question at point x equals 2. Right there. And that's all we did. Minus 6, 2, and minus 6 and 2. So all we have to do at the end of the day is find our points of intersection, label our axes, and that is it. And if you do this, you can draw pretty much any graph you get in the preliminary course or the HSC. Hope it helped. Also, learning this method will also help you do simultaneous equations, which we'll be covering in another video. If this video has helped you out, please like and subscribe and share it with your friends. Thanks.